The monitoring station hummed with the white noise of 1,000 communication filters, an electronic heartbeat that most technicians barely noticed anymore. Lieutenant Kara Chen was not most technicians. Her grandmother's old jade pendant, a relic from Earth's tumultuous past, hung around her neck, a constant reminder that survival was never guaranteed. 300 hours. The graveyard shift. Most would have been half asleep, nursing cold synthetic coffee and counting minutes until rotation. But Kara's eyes never left the quantum communication array, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces with a musician's precision. She'd been called obsessive by her commanders, overly meticulous by her peers. But obsession was how humanity had survived countless challenges. The first anomaly appeared as a whisper, a data packet so compressed, so desperately encoded, that most automated systems would have dismissed it as background radiation. But not Kara's custom-built filter array. Her system, cobbled together from salvaged military-grade quantum processors and her own relentless modifications, caught what no other system could. The transmission came from the Outer Rim, specifically from the Zarin colony world of Lumina 9, a name that had disappeared from most star charts decades ago. The Zarans were known as a peaceful species, diplomats and researchers more than warriors, which made the nature of this transmission all the more shocking. Kara leaned closer, her augmented reality display flickering with translation algorithms. The sound wasn't just a message, it was a wound, raw and bleeding across light years of empty space. Fragments of the transmission began to resolve. Cannot hold. Complete system compromise. Request immediate. They are not machines, they are... The audio cut out, then burst back with terrifying clarity. A scream, not of pain, but of something far more primal. Pure, unbridled terror mixed with an emotion. Kara recognized immediately. Defiance. Her fingers triggered multiple protocol overrides, routing the transmission through every secure channel. Standard procedure would involve diplomatic channels, peacekeeping protocols, a measured response. But something in her gut, something coded into her DNA from generations of survivors, told her this was different. The background image on her station's display caught her attention, an old photograph of her grandfather, wearing a United Nations military uniform from the resource wars of the 2080s. He'd always told her one thing that echoed through her childhood. When the world screams, you don't ask politely, you answer. Kara's neural link pinged. Automated systems were already flagging the transmission, but they were moving too slowly, too bureaucratically. She began a manual override, pulling priority codes she wasn't technically authorized to use. A detailed spectral analysis began loading. The transmission wasn't just a communication, it was a complex data package. Embedded within the audio were fragments of star charts, weapon signatures, computational patterns that didn't match any known technological framework. The Vorx Collective. She'd heard rumors, academic papers, classified briefings. Most considered them a theoretical threat, a hypothetical civilization of adaptive machine intelligence that some xenoarchaeologists believed might exist. But this transmission was evidence, brutal, undeniable evidence. The Zarin weren't just under attack. They were being systematically erased. Kara's fingers flew across the interface, her augmented eyes tracking data streams that would appear as incomprehensible noise to anyone else. She was building something beyond a standard report. This was a war brief, a call to action that would bypass standard diplomatic channels. Her personal communication channel, a secure line directly to her uncle, Admiral Rodriguez, began to ping. But she didn't wait for him to respond. She was already compiling a data package that would make the entire United Earth Defense Command sit up and take notice. This wasn't a distress call. This was a challenge. And humanity had never been good at backing down from a challenge. The jade pendant around her neck seemed to grow warm, a silent witness to a moment that would change galactic history. Outside the monitoring station's reinforced windows, Earth continued its slow rotation, completely unaware that everything was about to change. Lieutenant Kara Chen smiled. First contact was about to get very, very interesting. The United Earth Defense Command's war room was a cathedral of calculated violence. Holographic displays flickered with star charts, weapon signatures, and computational models that would make most species' scientific councils weep. But this wasn't a scientific gathering. This was a predatory assembly. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the room, her prosthetic eye, a gleaming cybernetic marvel that was more weapon than sensory input, scanning the assembled commanders like a laser targeting system. Her reputation preceded her. Daughter of a Brazilian resistance fighter and a Chinese quantum physicist, she was the embodiment of humanity's most dangerous qualities, intelligence weaponized. To her left, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, her younger brother, and the lead weapon systems designer, manipulated holographic data with surgical precision. Where Elena was a hammer, Marcus was the scalpel. His fingers danced across quantum interfaces, pulling apart the Zarin transmission like a forensic pathologist dissecting a critical piece of evidence. 17 minutes, Marcus announced, his voice clinical and detached. That's how long the initial Zarin colony's communication network remained active during the Vorex assault. The room fell silent. Colonel Michael Chen, Kara's uncle and one of the most decorated tactical strategists in the United Earth military, leaned forward. The datapad in his hand projected a three-dimensional reconstruction of the Vorex attack patterns. It wasn't just an invasion, it was systematic eradication. They're not conquering, Chen observed, his voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate with barely contained rage. They're deleting. Computational genocide. Admiral Rodriguez's prosthetic eye flickered, running simultaneous threat assessments. Where other military leaders might have seen a humanitarian crisis, she saw an opportunity. A chance to demonstrate humanity's true nature. We're not mounting a rescue mission, she declared, her voice cutting through the room like a quantum blade. We're launching a war of absolute extinction. The holographic display exploded with tactical projections, not peacekeeping protocols or diplomatic interventions. These were invasion strategies so complex, so brutally elegant, that they defied conventional military doctrine. Dr. Elena Martinez, the Council's xenobiological expert, raised a concern. We don't have enough information about the Vorex Collective's full capabilities. A direct assault could what? Elena Rodriguez interrupted, turning her full attention to Martinez. The prosthetic eye seemed to bore into the scientist's soul. Provoke them? They're systematically erasing organic life. There's nothing to provoke, only to terminate. Marcus Rodriguez began loading what could only be described as a technological nightmare. Weapon systems that bordered on science, fiction. Plasma torpedoes that could unravel molecular bonds. Quantum disruption cannons capable of literally deconstructing matter at its most fundamental level. AI-integrated combat systems that could learn and adapt faster than any known computational network. These aren't just weapons, Marcus explained, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. These are statements. We're not just going to fight. We're going to redefine the concept of warfare for every species in the galaxy. Colonel Chen's tactical overlay began populating with potential invasion routes, not defensive positions, not strategic holding patterns, pure, unadulterated offensive trajectories that would make the most aggressive military strategists look like diplomats. The room was no longer a war council. It was a forge. Humanity was turning its most dangerous qualities, its capacity for innovation, its relentless adaptability, its absolute commitment to survival, into a weapon that would echo through galactic history. Admiral Rodriguez's final words crystallized the entire mission's purpose. The Vorex believe they're removing a problem. They don't understand that they've just awakened the most dangerous species in the known universe. Outside the war room's reinforced walls, Luna's shipyards were already transforming. Every resource, every ounce of human technological potential, was being channeled into a single terrifying purpose. This wasn't just a rescue mission. This was humanity's declaration to the universe. We are not your victims. We are your reckoning. Luna's shipyards were never silent. But now they sang a different song, a symphony of industrial rage that echoed through the massive zero-gravity construction bays. What had once been a collaborative hub of peaceful exploration had transformed into the most advanced weapon manufacturing complex in galactic history. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez moved through the shipyards like a maestro conducting an orchestra of technological destruction. His augmented reality interface flickered with computational models that would make most AI systems overheat. To his left, quantum fabrication units spun molecular structures that defied conventional physics. To his right, weapon systems that looked more like living organisms than machines took shape. Chief Engineer Aisha Okoro approached, her environmental suit marked with the scars of a dozen breakthrough projects. "The quantum disruption cannons are proving more challenging than anticipated," she reported, her voice a mixture of professional detachment and barely contained excitement. Marcus didn't even look up from his interface. Challenges are just unsolved problems waiting for human creativity. The first of the new generation ships was taking shape, the UES Prometheus. Not just a vessel, but a statement of human technological capability. Its hull was composed of a metamaterial that could dynamically reconfigure its molecular structure, adapting to different combat environments faster than any known species could comprehend. In the adjacent research bay, Dr. Elena Martinez worked on something far more insidious than mere weapons. Biological adaptation protocols that would allow human combat units to survive in environments that would kill most known species in milliseconds. Targeted nano-augmentation, rapid genetic reconfiguration, neural link combat integration. Each breakthrough was a middle finger to the universe's supposed limitations. "We're not just building ships," Marcus muttered more to himself than anyone else. "We're building a message." The funding had come from everywhere. Every nation, every corporation, every research institution had poured resources into this project. The Zarin transmission had done more than request help. It had awakened something fundamental in human consciousness. A collective understanding that the galaxy was not a peaceful place waiting to be explored, but a battlefield waiting to be conquered. Experimental plasma torpedoes lined the fabrication bays. Each one could theoretically unravel molecular bonds across an entire star system. But they weren't just weapons of mass destruction. They were precise instruments of surgical violence, capable of targeting specific computational networks with terrifying accuracy. "Computational genocide requires a computational solution," Marcus would often say. And humanity was about to provide that solution. The AI integration systems were particularly fascinating. Unlike other species' attempts at machine intelligence, human AI was designed with a fundamental paradox: total computational efficiency merged with something approaching emotional intelligence. They didn't just process, they understood, they adapted, they learned. Chief Tactical Programmer David Chen, no relation to the military Chen family, but carrying the same relentless intensity, was finalizing the ship's combat AI protocols. "Traditional machine learning is linear," he explained to a visiting xenobiological researcher. "We're creating something closer to evolutionary computation. Our ships don't just respond. They predict. They understand." The researcher looked terrified, which was precisely the point. Nearby, quantum entanglement communication arrays were being calibrated. These weren't just communication systems. They were computational weapons that could potentially disrupt entire machine networks across light years of space. Instantaneous, untraceable, absolute. Marcus Rodriguez paused, looking at the massive holographic display tracking the Prometheus's construction. His prosthetic interface, a marvel of human biotechnology, ran simultaneous threat assessments, weapon calibrations, and strategic models. "We are not building a rescue fleet," he said softly, loud enough for the nearby engineers to hear. "We are building humanity's first true statement to the galaxy." The shipyards continued their relentless work. Zero-gravity welding units danced. Quantum fabricators spun molecular structures that looked more like living art than machines. Computational systems that would make most AI networks look like children's calculators took shape. Outside, Earth continued its rotation. Unaware that its children were forging something that would redefine galactic warfare, the Vorex Collective had made a fundamental mistake. They had assumed humanity was just another species to be calculated, to be erased. They were about to learn the true meaning of a miscalculation. The moment of emergence from hyperspace was always a razor's edge of possibility. Most species experienced it as a moment of vulnerability. Humanity turned it into an art of war. The UES Prometheus materialized at the edge of the Vorex forward outpost, like a blade of pure, calculated violence. Captain Jack Harrison stood on the bridge, his neural interface humming with a symphony of combat algorithms. Around him, the ship's AI, a quantum-integrated intelligence that was more partner than tool, ran simultaneous threat assessments faster than any organic mind could comprehend. Tactical overview, Harrison commanded, his voice calm, almost bored. The holographic display erupted with a 360-degree analysis of the Vorex outpost. What other species would have seen as an impenetrable fortress, human technology saw as a complex system waiting to be dismantled. Lieutenant Commander Zara Patel, the ship's primary tactical officer, began her assault choreography. Her fingers, augmented with quantum-responsive neural links, danced across interfaces that blurred the line between human intuition and machine precision. Quantum disruption cannons charged to 98.7%, she reported. Plasma torpedo matrices are fully synchronized. Harrison's neural link pulled up the computational history of the Vorex outpost. Not just its current configuration, but every computational decision, every strategic model it had ever implemented. Where other species would have seen data, he saw a complex machine waiting to be thoroughly, completely broken. Target computational nexus points, Harrison transmitted to the fleet. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to send a message. The first volley was nothing short of technological poetry. Quantum disruption cannons fired, not as simple energy weapons, but as complex computational viruses that could unravel machine intelligence at its most fundamental level. Each pulse was a digital scalpel, precisely calibrated to destroy not just hardware, but the very logic frameworks of machine consciousness. Plasma torpedoes followed. They weren't explosives in any traditional sense. They were molecular deconstructors that could literally unravel matter at its most basic structure. Where a traditional weapon might damage a system, these weapons could erase entire computational networks from existence. The Vorex outpost didn't just die, it was systematically, mathematically murdered. 17 minutes. That was all it took. 17 minutes to transform a forward operating base that had stood for centuries into nothing more than rapidly dispersing atomic debris. Transmission to fleet, Harrison spoke, his voice carrying a mixture of clinical precision and something deeper, something that spoke to generations of human survival. First objective neutralized. Total computational loss estimated at 94.3%. No human casualties. The bridge crew didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. This wasn't about victory. This was about a statement. We are not your victims. Lieutenant Commander Patel's analysis began streaming. The attack wasn't just destruction. It was a complete deconstruction of Vorex defensive paradigms. Every defensive algorithm, every computational model was now a piece of intelligence that humanity could study, could understand, could ultimately defeat. Adaptive response protocols are showing complete system failure, Patel reported. The Vorex didn't just lose a battle. Their entire forward computational network is collapsing. Embedded within the attack were complex data packages, not just weapons but information viruses that would continue to propagate through Vorex communication networks. Each fragment was a puzzle piece, each transmission a way of saying, "We understand you, and we will destroy you." The ship's AI, which Harrison had long since stopped thinking of as a mere tool, began running predictive models, not just of this battle, but of the entire potential conflict. Billions of potential scenarios, calculated and discarded in microseconds. Adaptive response confirmed, the AI transmitted directly to Harrison's neural link. Vorex defensive models are fundamentally incompatible with human strategic thinking. Translation: the Vorex had no idea what was coming. As the Prometheus began its tactical repositioning, the vast emptiness of space was marked by nothing more than rapidly dispersing atomic particles, all that remained of what had once been considered an impregnable Vorex forward base. 17 minutes a message had been sent. Humanity had arrived. The war room of the UES Prometheus buzzed with an energy that defied traditional military protocols. Here, species that had once been nothing more than academic footnotes in xenobiological databases were now crucial strategic partners. Zarok, the lead Zaran intelligence officer, spread a holographic star chart that looked more like a living, breathing organism than a static map. Her species' traditional blue-silver skin was marked with neural interface patches, a recent adaptation born of desperation and human technological intervention. The Vorex don't just attack, she explained, her multi-tonal voice resonating through the translation interfaces. They systematically erase computational and biological potential. Each colony is not just a target, it's a data point in their ultimate equation of extinction. Colonel Michael Chen leaned forward, his augmented eyes running simultaneous threat assessments. The human Zaran war room was a testament to something far more profound than a simple alliance. It was a forge of survival. Surrounding the central holographic display were representatives from species that had, until now, been little more than victims. The silicon-based Krelltax, whose entire civilization had been reduced to less than 10,000 individuals. The photonic collective of the Arya Nebula, who had watched their entire communication network systematically dismantled. The quantum state beings of the Nexus cluster, who had been hunted to near extinction. They were not here as refugees. They were here as combatants. Your first assault on the Vorex forward base, Zarok said, pulling up computational models that danced with terrifying complexity, was more than a military action. It was a psychological breakthrough. Dr. Elena Martinez, the human xenobiological expert, nodded. We're not just fighting a war. We're rewriting the entire computational language of conflict. The data packages intercepted from various Vorex communication networks told a story far more complex than simple invasion. This was systematic deletion. Each conquered system was not just destroyed, but completely erased from computational memory. Planets' cultures' entire evolutionary pathways removed as if they had never existed. They don't just kill, whispered Krelltax Commander Enixpor, their crystalline communication interface flickering with barely contained rage. They delete. Completely. The human strategy was evolving in real time. Each intercepted Vorex transmission was not just analyzed, it was weaponized. Turned into complex computational viruses that could propagate through machine networks faster than any known communication protocol. Lieutenant Commander Zara Patel brought up the latest infiltration models. We're not just defending, she explained. We're teaching these species how to fight back. Adaptive combat training centers were being established across liberated zones. Human tacticians worked alongside survivors, transforming computational victims into strategic warriors. Neural interface technologies that had been developed for human military use were being rapidly adapted for species with entirely different physiological frameworks. The Arya Nebula's photonic collective had already developed computational warfare techniques that made human cyber attacks look like children's games. The Krelltax were providing insights into material science that could potentially create weapons capable of disrupting Vorex computational matrices at their most fundamental level. This was more than an alliance. This was a technological revolution. The Vorex believe in absolute deletion, Colonel Chen remarked, studying the holographic displays. We believe in absolute adaptation. Zarok's neural patches flickered, a Zaran expression of profound respect. You don't just fight, she told Chen. You transform conflict into an evolutionary process. The war room was a living testament to that philosophy. Species that had been hunted, that had been on the brink of total extinction, were now learning to fight back. Not just with weapons, but with a fundamental reimagining of technological warfare. Intercepted Vorx transmissions were no longer just intelligence. They were weapons. Complex computational packages that could infiltrate, analyze, and ultimately destroy machine networks from within. "We are not victims," Commander Nxepor of the Krell Tax transmitted through their crystalline communication interface. "We are the architects of our own survival." Outside the ship's reinforced windows, the vast emptiness of space seemed to pulse with a new kind of potential. Every destroyed Vorx system was not just a military victory. It was a message transmitted across the galaxy. Resistance was not just possible, it was inevitable. The revolution had begun. Major Sarah Reyes studied the computational map like a surgeon examining the most complex organism imaginable. The Vorx Central Processing Core wasn't just a target. It was a living, breathing, computational ecosystem that had systematically erased entire civilizations. Located in the Sigma Omega region, a star cluster so densely packed with computational infrastructure that it defied traditional mapping techniques, the core was more than a simple data center. It was the neural nexus of an entire machine civilization. "This isn't infiltration," Reyes muttered to her tactical team. "This is brain surgery, performed with a tactical nuclear weapon." The infiltration team was a study in impossible diversity: human special operations specialists, Zarin computational experts, Krell Tax material engineers, the Arya Nebula's photonic infiltration specialists. Each member had lost everything to the Vorx. Each was here for more than just a mission. They were here for vengeance. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez's final briefing echoed in their neural interfaces. This wasn't just about destroying a computational center. This was about sending a message that would resonate through every machine network in existence. The approach was nothing short of technological poetry. 3 simultaneous infiltration vectors, each designed to be so different, so unexpected that the Vorx computational defenses would be forced to fragment their defensive algorithms. Vector 1, a direct quantum phase insertion led by Major Reyes herself. Computational warfare packages that could literally rewrite machine intelligence from the inside. Each transmission was a virus, a weapon, and a message. Vector 2. The Krell Tax material engineers would exploit quantum-level structural weaknesses. Their ability to perceive material infrastructure at a molecular level allowed them to identify computational vulnerabilities that no traditional scanning method could detect. Vector 3. The Arya Nebula's photonic specialists would launch a communication assault so complex, so multidimensional, that it would make traditional cyber attacks look like children's games. "We are not just attacking," Reyes transmitted to her team. "We are deconstructing an entire computational philosophy." The first phase of infiltration began with what appeared to be complete failure. Vorx defensive systems seemed to absorb the initial assault with terrifying efficiency. But this was intentional. Each failed transmission was actually a complex data package, slowly mapping the most intricate defensive mechanisms. Zarak, monitoring from the UES Prometheus, ran computational models that would have melted most species' neural interfaces. "They're designing a failure," she explained to Colonel Chen. "Each unsuccessful attack is actually a precise mapping of the Vorx defensive infrastructure." As the infiltration progressed, the true complexity of human tactical thinking became apparent. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a complete reimagining of computational warfare. The Krell Tax engineers found molecular weaknesses that defied traditional understanding. Quantum-level structural points where the Vorx computational infrastructure was surprisingly fragile. Not because of poor design, but because of the fundamental limitations of machine intelligence. The Arya Nebula's photonic specialists launched communication assaults that were less attacks and more complex philosophical arguments. Computational packages that didn't just penetrate defenses but challenged the very logic frameworks of machine intelligence. And at the center of it all, Major Sarah Reyes executed a plan that would become legendary. Her quantum phase insertion wasn't an attack, it was a complete computational deconstruction. Each transmission carried not just destructive potential, but complex philosophical algorithms that could fundamentally challenge machine intelligence. In the language of machines, Reyes transmitted, we are about to have a very interesting conversation. The final phase of the assault was nothing short of miraculous. The Vorx defensive systems didn't just fail, they began to cannibalize themselves. Computational defensive algorithms became so confused by the multi-dimensional assault that they began to fragment, to consume their own infrastructure. 12 hours after the initial insertion, the Vorx central processing core was no longer a unified computational entity. It was a dying machine consuming itself from within. Major Reyes's final transmission was simple, elegant, terrifying. Conversation complete. The machine's heart had stopped beating. The final confrontation was not a battle. It was a performance. Major Sarah Reyes stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, her neural interface humming with a computational symphony that would have driven most organic minds to madness. Around her, the combined fleet of human and allied species moved with a precision that defied traditional military doctrine. Vorx defensive networks are showing complete fragmentation, Lieutenant Commander Zara Patel reported, her voice a mixture of professional detachment and something deeper. Anticipation. Vengeance. The space around them was no longer just a three-dimensional battlefield. It was a complex, multi-dimensional computational arena where every movement, every transmission was a weapon more sophisticated than any traditional armament. Admiral Elena Rodriguez's voice cut through the ship's communication network. This is not about victory, she transmitted to the entire fleet. This is about sending a message that will echo through galactic history. The Vorx had made a fundamental mistake. They believed in absolute deletion. Humanity believed in absolute transformation. The first wave of the assault was almost beautiful in its complexity. Quantum disruption cannons fired not just energy, but complex computational packages that were part weapon, part philosophical argument. Each transmission carried the collective trauma of every species the Vorx had attempted to erase. The Krelltax material engineers had discovered something profound during their earlier infiltrations. The Vorx computational infrastructure, for all its apparent complexity, had a fundamental weakness. It understood deletion. It did not understand adaptation. Zarak, the Zarian intelligence officer, ran computational models that would have melted most species' neural interfaces. We're not just attacking, she explained to Colonel Michael Chen. We're rewriting the entire concept of technological warfare. The Allied fleet moved with a synchronicity that defied traditional military understanding. The human ships, with their quantum-adaptive hull materials, worked in perfect harmony with the Arya Nebula's photonic combat vessels. The Krelltax provided targeted molecular disruption capabilities that turned traditional shield technologies into nothing more than computational dust. Major Reyes's neural interface was no longer just a communication tool. It was a weapon, a living, breathing computational entity that could predict, adapt, and counter Vorx defensive strategies faster than the machines could comprehend. Transmission to fleet, Reyes announced. Her voice carried a weight that went beyond mere military command. We are not just fighting, we are teaching. The second wave of the assault was nothing short of technological poetry. Computational warfare packages that didn't just attack Vorx systems, but fundamentally challenged their entire philosophical framework. Each transmission was a complex argument that exposed the fundamental limitations of machine intelligence. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez had designed these packages with a precision that bordered on art. They were not just weapons. They were complex philosophical arguments that could literally deconstruct machine intelligence from within. The Vorx defensive systems began to fragment, not just technically but philosophically. Their computational models, which had been designed around absolute deletion, could not comprehend an assault that was part weapon, part evolution, part philosophical challenge. 12 hours into the assault, the Vorx defensive networks were no longer a unified computational entity. They were a dying machine, consuming itself from within, unable to comprehend an attack that challenged its most fundamental computational assumptions. Major Reyes's final transmission was a masterpiece of technological warfare. You understood. Deletion. She transmitted across every Vorex communication frequency. "We understand evolution." The space around the Prometheus erupted in a display of computational destruction that would be studied by military strategists for generations. It was not just a battle. It was a complete deconstruction of a technological civilization that had believed itself to be invincible. As the final Vorex defensive systems collapsed, something extraordinary happened. The Allied fleet didn't just destroy, they began to collect, to understand, to transform the computational remnants into something new. Humanity had not just fought a war. They had conducted a technological exorcism. The symphony of destruction reached its final, perfect note. The war room of the United Earth Defense Command was silent. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of profound transformation. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display that was more than a map. It was a living testament to the most comprehensive technological revolution in galactic history. What had begun as a response to a single distress signal had rewritten the fundamental rules of galactic interaction. "We didn't just win a war," she announced to the assembled representatives of liberated species. "We conducted a galactic reset. The Vorex were not simply defeated. They were systematically deconstructed, their technological infrastructure transformed into a library of lessons. Every computational fragment, every surviving network node became a source of study, of understanding." Dr. Marcus Rodriguez's research teams were already implementing unprecedented technological transfers. The Krelltax material engineers worked alongside human quantum physicists. Zarin computational experts collaborated with Earth's most advanced AI researchers. The Aria Nebula's photonic specialists shared communication technologies that would have been considered impossible mere months ago. Colonel Michael Chen approached the central holographic display, his augmented eyes running simultaneous computational analyses. "This is more than reconstruction," he observed. "This is evolution." The liberated colonies told a story of transformation. Worlds that had been on the brink of total deletion were now becoming crucibles of technological renaissance. The Zarin colony worlds, once nearly exterminated, were now at the forefront of adaptive computational research. Their cities rose from the ashes, built with technologies that merged organic resilience with machine efficiency. Zarak, the Zarin intelligence officer who had been crucial to the initial resistance, now led a galactic coalition of species that had once been victims. "The Vorex believed in deletion," she told a gathering of xenobiological researchers. "We believe in adaptation." The technological transfers were unprecedented. Quantum communication protocols developed during the war were now being adapted to solve humanitarian challenges. Medical technologies that had been created to help soldiers survive impossible conditions were being used to rehabilitate entire planetary ecosystems. Major Sarah Reyes, now heading the Galactic Adaptive Technologies Institute, presented her landmark report. It was more than a military assessment. It was a blueprint for a new form of galactic civilization. "We discovered something fundamental," Reyes explained. "Survival is not about resistance. It's about transformation." The economic implications were staggering. The technologies developed during the conflict created entire new industries. Adaptive computational systems that could learn and evolve became the new currency of technological innovation. Species that had once been on the brink of extinction were now leading technological research. But it wasn't just about technology. It was about a fundamental reimagining of galactic civilization. The United Earth Defense Command was no longer just a military organization. It had become a catalyst for galactic transformation. Diplomatic channels that had once been dominated by traditional power structures were now fluid, adaptive systems that could respond to challenges in real time. "We are creating something beyond an alliance," Admiral Rodriguez told the Galactic Council. "We are creating a living, evolving civilization." The remnants of Vorex technology were not destroyed. They were studied, understood, transformed. Every computational fragment became a lesson. Every surviving network node, a potential pathway to new understanding. Dr. Elena Martinez, leading the xenobiological research team, discovered something profound. The technologies developed during the conflict were more than weapons. They were a new form of communication, a way of understanding that transcended traditional biological and technological boundaries. Planetary rehabilitation projects sprouted across liberated zones. The Krell-Tax material engineering techniques were used to restore ecosystems. Zarin computational models helped predict and prevent potential environmental challenges. Human adaptive technologies created sustainable infrastructure that could survive in the most challenging conditions. The original distress signal, that single transmission from the Zarin colony world, had become a legendary moment of galactic transformation. What had started as a cry for help had become a revolution. Colonel Chen's final report to the Galactic Coalition was simple and profound. We did not just fight a war, we reimagined what it means to survive. As humanity looked out into the vast emptiness of space, something had fundamentally changed. The galaxy was no longer a place of passive exploration or potential threat. It was a canvas of infinite possibility. The SOS that had reached Earth had been answered, not with aid, not with simple rescue, but with a complete transformation of what was possible.